What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Roots. So I'm going to review the debut album by the Notorious B.I.G. Basically this product is called Ready to Die and it came out in the late summer of 1994. So the thing about this particular product, this is a pretty heralded type product here. This is one of those pitches of albums that this is particularly culturally notable as far as this pitch can happen. Nowadays it's been nominated for like being in like the Library of Congress pitches like that. This definitely has some pretty star-studded type appeal. One of the signature albums in rap music out of the 90s and typically kind of seen by most publications and pitches like that, critics, rave critics between, I mean, it just has pretty overall large heraldment in terms of like being like a 5-star or 5 mic album as far as those pitches can happen. Double XL would probably give that album like a double XL pitch like that. Most of these folks that have to do with hip hop social media probably feel like this is a defining work of art as far as those pitches can happen, and it definitely is pretty superbly stellar. This is going to somewhat miss like the concept of getting like a classic score here, but it definitely has more hits on here than it does. It's just within the pitch behind it. I will say this is a lot more gritty of like a product. This is like a good alternative. The way that Wu-Tang and like the East Coast were kind of dominating like the early mid 90s with things like Return to like the 36 Chambers album from the fall of 1993, and then like also like Old Dirty Bastards Return to the 36 Chambers that was getting ready to come out like less than 6 months later, and then Method Man's T-Call, some of those type of ones. There was kind of like an East Coast kind of revitalization that was going on in like the early mid 90s. Biggie was definitely a part of that between him and Puff Daddy within those particular type of fields. It's really had some good aspects about it. But I just look after it here. The concept about it is I learned later on, I didn't realize this back in the day, but it was only recently surfaced around these particular times that Biggie was not really terribly too much of a fan of songs like some of the more chart appeal type ones like Juicy, Big Papa, and One More Chance, and some of those type of pitches. He was kind of more on songs like Gimme the Loot and Warning and like songs like that, like Things Done Change, some of those type of pitches, some of those type of songs in particular. This is almost kind of like a dichotomy of an album just within the pitch, that it has like some chart appeal within it, but it just kind of tells two sides of a coin, where some of it's like the seedier kind of more grime of like New York hip hop as it was kind of going through changes as well. I mean, I feel like Wu-Tang probably did for the East Coast in terms of 90s music what like Dr. Dre did for the West Coast in terms of 90s music. It's just the pitch behind it. Both those albums were pretty significant around those times, and Biggie was one of those ones. I don't know if it would be like the I don't know if Biggie's album would be like the Doggy Style of like the 90s for the East Coast, but it was definitely pretty one that just had that particular pitch, as both sides, both coasts were kind of starting to blow up within the pitches behind it. But back in these days in these particular days in early mid 1994, this is before like the Tupac and Biggie beef as far as those pitches can happen. But yeah, this album did pretty large deal, went 6 tons platinum, which I didn't realize about that. I thought it was only like 2 or 3 tons platinum. But basically, pretty dominant type project just within the tone. Now, I do feel like, if you want my public opinion about it, I do feel like the album Life After Death completely flattens the sound. That, to me, is more of like a classic full-blown. I'd say it's unfortunate that that album didn't get the promotion that Biggie truly wanted for it, because he passed before that album even came out. But it's just within the pitch that this is really, apart from the Junior Mafia album, like the only real album that Biggie was able to promote with like the standard fare of within that lifetime. And it's always been kind of a question mark to me as to why the One More Chance remix was never on this album. That was clearly the larger song, but it just never showed up on that particular album. I mean, you can find it nowadays. You can find the Stay With Me One More Chance remix on like Biggie compilations, like greatest hits albums that he's done, and like the Notorious movie soundtrack, some of those type fairs I reviewed back in the day, some of those type fairs, but it's just within the pitch that it's kind of a tough to track down song. I don't know why they never released like a deluxe edition of that particular song. I mean, I don't know if it would take away from like the magic and just the overall gracefulness and just the enchantment of that particular song, but I definitely think it probably needs to be available somewhere. I'm just surprised that Biggie didn't put out like an EP or something like that. It would have been a good type tone to have gotten like some bona fide type stuff. Because yeah, Biggie was definitely the shit in 1995. Everything he did, he was one of those rappers that just had the Midas touch. Like when you think of Lil Wayne in 2008 or T.I. in 2006, some of those type of folks, trying to think of other ones like Waka Flocka in 2010, Drake in 2011, 2012, some of those type ones that they just ran that whole particular year. That's basically what Biggie did throughout 1995. This particular album was not an immediate type hit. It was kind of the concept as to how it went, and like when it started being promoted in like the summer of 94, it was not until like the combination of like the after effects of Juicy and moreover Big Papa, and then especially like the One More Chance remix in the summer of 95 that really pushed Biggie into like the superstardom as far as this pitch kind of happened. But it was just so short lived, because he went from just kind of being like a household name by probably like the spring summer of 95 to only really being able to promote like the Junior Mafia Conspiracy album. Then he died before Life After Death can happen. But this is some good tough stuff. I mean, I will tell you, Biggie shreds apart this particular album. There's just, I cannot think of terribly many lyricists that just have the dynamite kind of overall lyrical barbed wire lyricism that he particularly has. Just the fact that he was only 22, 23 doing this, just in the pitch, and being able to knock these out of the park, and just having there's just some compellingness that there's just not a ton of folks. I mean, you will find lyricism within the pitch. There are folks like Lil Wayne and, like Lil Wayne, Andre 3000, some of those type folks, Nas, Jay-Z, some of those type folks, Eminem, just within the pitch. But in terms of like just the aspect, the fact that he was just able to freestyle these and just come up with a lot of this. I mean, I think Biggie wrote the occasional lyric, but just in terms of the tone of him just being able to memorize, not just freestyle this, but be able to memorize his lines and just be able to have like full song verses and just be able to do it just within the tones. Just some excellent type fare. So it's definitely a pretty classic just in the NPL behind us. It definitely had the makings of it, but it is a little bit grittier. It's just kind of the concept. I do feel like Life After Death just had a lot more just overall commercial type pizzazz and pitches like that. Just overall had the affability a little bit better, but this definitely had some good grit and just the concept of like an impactful type one that was just a great debut within the pitch. But so I look after, there were 3 singles off this project. The first one is probably one that I think a lot of folks like y'all have probably heard within. The first one is probably a song that I think a lot of folks have probably heard within those pitches, and that would be Juicy. It's like a classic kind of rags to riches, overcome struggle joint to kind of get here. It's kind of a dreary city hop, I'd have to say, within that pitch. Just some day. It's like a dreary kind of city hop day, I'd have to say, within those pitches. Just standard vanilla traffic path. The song would just be like some standard kind of vanilla traffic paths to kind of get within that tone as far as that particular fare kind of happens. It's one of those typical type ones. It's pretty much like the second largest song off this particular album, I'd have to say. Just a standard type joint. When you think of something, just like, okay, got to get some money, got to stack up, got to get to it, got to get on the grind, some of that type fare. Just the concept of like, hey, I'm going to get a job, something like that, just in the pitch behind it. It's just kind of the tone of having that particular. I mean, back in like 1994, this was kind of like a hustler's, this like dreamboat of a song, because it was just the aspect of just making it from like the grit and the grime and some of those type of pitches, and actually getting to like the cream of the crop and millionaire status and higher as far as those pitches can happen. But nowadays it just kind of uses more of like a blue collar, just kind of more relatively urban kind of hustle, more relatively urban kind of makeshift kind of blue collar and just bustle type song. But it still works for what it is. Just a 90s staple, I would definitely feel like. Real nice sample on there and pitches like that. Now, an obvious highlight of this album, and I will say that Juicy had over 700, almost 800 million plays on Spotify. It's definitely a pretty popular one. Big Papa is the second single. Now, this is probably one of Biggie's most signature songs. Continues to be one of his biggest just overall. I'd say it has over 1 billion plays on Spotify. I'd say about that. It's like a signature kind of big balling kind of night venue ambience kind of get here. I would definitely feel like just a staple of like the 90s by far. I'd say within that particular fare. This is one that you can continue to hear on the radio even today. It's easy type one to take it back to 94 or 96. Some of those type vibes that I'd say. And it's like a lavish kind of chandelier, graceful house kind of get within that tone. Like the after effect of Puff Daddy being on this song, also him and Biggie and Puff Daddy were like a great 1-2 punch back in like the mid-90s as far as those pitches can happen. This is just some good type of appeal. Biggie really eradicates this particular song and just does it with flair. It's a real good aspect of just having that particular stylishness, just nailing a single, being able to do it, and just having the aspects of just having the stylishness and just the lyricism that's not too lyrical, but also enough to kind of be like a whammy as far as being able to get towards some of this and just be able to knock things out and just be like a slam dunk as far as those pitches can happen. So it really knocks that out. So the third single, and I am going to talk about the promotional single Warning. That's another one to kind of get to here, but One More Chance is the third single, and this is one that's kind of in 2 variations. I'm just going to talk about the one. I'm not going to talk about the remix because it's not actually on this album, but the remix is the one that hit number 2 on the Billboard 100 and is basically one of Biggie's best songs overall. It's just another staple of the 90s just to talk about that one, and that's why it's such a colossal shame that it was never packaged on an album, because this is such a dynamite type song. But the One More Chance OG version, this is like a madly overlooked kind of woozy evening after moments kind of get within that tone. It's definitely like some woozy kind of evening after moments reflect to kind of get within that pitch behind it, and it's like a good quick push to kind of have within that tone. So it's just some quick pace in here, just living fast, just within the tone behind it, just the aspect. It's the aspect of kind of being in forward as far as those pitches kind of happen. Just the concept of watching your life kind of multiply as far as those pitches kind of happen, just within the tone of really getting towards the stacking money up, more women stacking money up, more women around, pitches like that, more buddies, more opportunities, pitches like that, just going more places, just within the tone of just just having things multiply just within the pitch behind it. So some excellent type fare. Really like the aspect of some of that type one. It's real. I mean, the original One More Chance is nothing to really shake a stick at either. I mean, it's obviously not as affable in terms of like the vanilla kind of appeal that it has, but it is a nice kind of slinky type one that works pretty well. Just a real good type tone to kind of have for just checking like your answer machine at like 6:30 p.m. something like that, just the pitch before heading out to like a night venue. This would be like a primer, kind of like some evening excitement to kind of get before going to songs like Big Papa and Who Shot Ya. And like I would probably say there's actually not that many club songs on this particular album. Maybe like songs like The What and like a Homies type sense, but for the most part, Big Papa is like one of the lone songs off this product that really has that club type appeal. I'd say Who Shot Ya might be another one, which is only really on the remaster edition, but it's just kind of the concept that One More Chance is kind of like a primer, but it is a good song, and it competes with, it may not directly compete with like the Stay With Me remix, but all four of the singles, or all five of the singles off this project, including Warning, are some pretty excellent type fare. And then Warning is the promo single. It's like a vintage and routine kind of sampled album highlight. Warning is like a vintage and kind of routine sampled kind of album highlight to kind of get here. Definitely a hitter with credentials, I'd have to say about this particular song. A lot of folks have done this on like mixtape type fare, just doing the same type vibe of Biggie, just talking with folks on this particular song, talking about who the fuck is this paging me at 5:46 in the morning, crack of dawn, and now I'm yawning, just within the pitch of just that particular type fare, just standard type intro, just real classic type appeal, just constantly rephrased, constantly reference some of those type pitches just to get within the tone about it. Just like the song is definitely like some good night move around as far as those pitches kind of happen just within the tone. So this is one that just kind of feels like this kind of more errands type running just within the pitch behind it, just getting more tasks done, not quite as much of a primer for like step out and party type nights like Big Papa and One More Chance, but definitely within the pitch of just like the concept of this last minute task, roping up some bills, getting that phone bill paid, some of those type pitches, some of those type things, getting like an oil change, or just the standard concept of just figuring out what you're going to do in terms of like more kind of day-to-day type tasks within the tone behind it. But it's really a straightening song, but works for what it is. So that's the basic tone about this album in terms of like the singles. So I would have to say that the remaster is definitely the variation of this album to get nowadays. It just has two extra. The remaster has two extra kind of bonus songs that hit the nail pretty heavily on the head. That probably should just be on like the standard edition in general. But it's just within the pitch. Who Shot Ya and Just Playing Dreams are two excellent type ones that are very necessary to kind of get, just because they're extra type tones to kind of have for like some just overall impact that are actually better than some of the songs I don't recommend on here. So with the remaster, there's 17 songs on this album, not counting like the two skits. There's 19 songs altogether, but minus like the intro and the Fuck Me interlude, as far as those pitches kind of happen, narrows it down to 17. On the standard edition, that narrows it down to 15. So out of the 15 songs on this album and the standard edition, there's 4 I don't recommend. Those songs would be Things Done Changed, Give Me the Loot, Respect, and Unbelievable. And also on the remaster, out of 17 songs, there's 4 songs I don't recommend. So that's basically, either way you look after it, it's 11 out of 15 or 13 out of 17. So the standard edition of this album, I'm going to give like an 8.75. Now I realized when I reviewed J. Cole recently that I gave that album me recommending 12 out of 15 to 10 out of 10. And that's only one song less from that, but I kind of look after just within the tone. I mean, you have to understand that this is kind of within the context as far as saying that. I mean, it's just kind of, it's in a relative type territory where it would I would feel like it would almost get like a mild 9. I would almost have to say, I would almost feel like 11 out of 15 is close enough to being able to say that's like a mild 9 out of 10. But it's also within the pitch of just saying that 15 songs is just right at that concept of just the album length. I mean, you have to understand that 7.5 songs out of 15 is half the album. So going from basically 8 songs to 11 songs, just 3 more songs being the difference between like a 6 out of 10 and a 9 out of 10. It's just kind of the pitch that there's some in between type there. So it's just within the pitch as far as saying it'd be like an 8.75, like a mild 9. But because I'm reviewing the remastered edition, I just would say that the remastered edition, that's 13 songs out of 17, I'm going to give like a 9.25, 2 out of 10. So that's just the better, it just is playing better. There's really no excuse to not get the remaster just because the songs, I mean, Who Shot You is just such a good song that you might as well get that particular edition, even if you have to pay a little bit more. And Just Playing Dreams is just a real original type song that has that particular fare. So the remastered edition gets a 9.25 out of 10 just in the pitch. But yeah, just because there's 4 songs I don't recommend on here, so I don't give this album a 10 out of 10. But let's talk about some of these songs on here. Like some of these type ones, like there are some city hop type ones. I feel like this variation of like how that particular kind of happens. There's just some real New York embrace as far as those pitches can happen, just amongst like the city weaving pitches like that. Songs like Things Done Change, just like a neighborhood kind of just glaze and just pitches like that. Just kind of the malaise of just like some just kind of the horror of just dealing with life in the slums, which I just didn't have as much full-bound appreciation for. And it's kind of the same thing with Give Me the Loot, this kind of one that just felt like some city weaving. Just, I mean, these are not bad songs by the stretch of it, but I just don't see the frequency of me really oftenly listening to some of these type ones. I just didn't really have as much pizzazz. It's the same thing with Unbelievable. That one was just kind of an in-between type one. Pretty much just like a worse variation of like Everyday Struggle and Juicy, some of those type ones. It just kind of felt like a kind of foggy or just kind of relatively dredgy kind of Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon just in the pitch behind it, but it just didn't have the same appeal about it. And then Respect was like another city hop type one that just didn't really have as much tone. That one was just a little bit more boom bap of type one as far as those pitches kind of happen. Just not as good aspected one. I feel like Machine Gun Funk just nailed that particular vibe a little bit better. So quick pace at type one Respect. I did like the lyrics on the song Respect. Definitely Biggie had some good flows on there, but this was not one I just Respect is just not one I just commonly listen to. I'd say within the pitch. There's just some ones on here. I feel like Biggie, because this album does not have very many guests apart from Method Man, I just would have to say the concept about it is there's a lot of songs on here that just kind of have some in between type moments in terms of city hop type fare and just extra type time in terms of like other things to do. Because Biggie was not really so much like a full bound kind of multi-millionaire just yet. It's just kind of within the pitch as you get some of these type ones. Like this is the aspect. It just didn't have as much. It didn't pull out the vibe nearly as well. It just didn't pull out the vibe nearly as well in terms of like the songwriting quite yet. Just within the pitch behind it. Now, if it had been Life After Death Biggie, I think he would have had the topics like some of those type of ones that he did with like What's Beef and like the song he did with Lil Kim. Like I forget the name of that song, but Another, some of those type of ones, and like songs like Fuck You Tonight, some of those type of pitches. I mean, it just had different aspects. I mean, Life After Death was definitely a pretty multifaceted type project, but it just felt a little bit dry on like the concept of like some of the songwriting with some of these extra city hop type moments. I mean, they're good for like that New York grit within certain senses for folks, but they just didn't have as much appeal in my opinion. But so yeah, talk about some of these on here. So yeah, Who Shot You is one of the best songs on this particular album. Definitely is like a secretive and relatively uncommon kind of Biggie slammer to kind of get here. Just a sharp, piercing beat. I would feel like I originally thought that this was a DJ Premier type beat. I originally thought that DJ Premier had more productions on this particular product. Apparently, I mean, it seemed like that was his beat. I know he at least did Unbelievable, but it seemed like he worked with Biggie a little bit more. I could have thought that Who Shot You was like a DJ Premier type beat, but either way, it's a real nice one. It's just an ice cold tone to kind of get out this particular song. This is easily one of the ones to go for immediately. Continues to be a Biggie favorite just within the pitch, but it's just not as commonly talked about because not every album that particularly has it. That just is within the pitch behind it. But this is kind of seems like a pseudo kind of Tupac diss. It just kind of came out at like not very popular type timing around the same time. It just, I don't want to say Biggie was in the wrong for making this song, but it just kind of felt almost pompous making this sort of song around approximately the same time as Tupac got shot for the first time in the fall of '94. So it's just within the pitch. It just kind of felt not so. It just kind of felt mildly pompous just within the pitch. Just the concept of some of that type fare behind it. But it is a nice song, definitely within the fare behind it. Can be perceived as like a Tupac diss, but it really, I don't think it full bound was intended to be. But this is the pitch. And then the What is a nice song here. This is the song. This is the only song with a guest on here, and this has Method Man, which kind of gives it some Wu-Tang flavor. It's like a woozy, kind of almost Wu-Tang like the What is like a woozy, almost Wu-Tang like kind of hangout saunter kind of get within that pitch. It's a good NY Dap song kind of have within the pitch behind it. Just smoke a couple joints, I would definitely feel like a good song to vibe to. So it just feels like something that you would have gotten from like the Wu-Tang 1993 album, some of those type fares just in the pitch. I mean, Biggie keeps up with Method Man. They're both good lyrical spar buddies as far as those pitch can have with it. Just good type tone. It's basically a taste in late '93, early '94. Or just a good taste of late '93, late '94 pitches like the early mid 2000s, like the NY sense. So it's a good type fare for that. Another pretty relatively popular highlight would be Machine Gun Funk. Just like a quick paced kind of saloon music. I would definitely feel like here in evening, big city embrace kind of get within that pitch behind it. This is a better variation of a song like Give Me the Loot. This one just nails a little bit better. It's a little bit more of like a breezy type song. It's like a great kind of long day unwind and kind of get within that pitch behind it. So I just would say about this particular one, there is a mild bit of makeshift on here. Songs like Everyday Struggle. So songs like Everyday Struggle, but this, I feel like Biggie just kind of had the relief of just because Biggie's wit was a little bit higher than seemingly for the folks that were kind of around that time, was just kind of the pitch that he just had the concept of just being able to kind of just be like, fuck that shit, time to steam some blunts and pitches like that, just in the tone behind it. I mean, the thing with Biggie out this particular project is he's kind of spastic. He kind of gives off like Chris Tucker type vibes. It's an interesting type pitch just because you would think he was a lot more sluggish. He wasn't like that on Life After Death. It's just kind of the pitch. It's a little bit more kind of loose cannon type pitch, a little bit reminded me more of like Tupac and like the All Eyes on Me days, with songs like, even though it wasn't on the album, songs like Hit 'Em Up and Ambitions as a writer. Biggie was just a little bit more spastic and just kind of more Chris Tucker, like I'd have to say, within the pitch behind it. There's just some songs on here, Machine Gun Funk, Respect, Give Me the Loot, some of those type ones. Even the What was kind of like that. It's just kind of the pitch behind it that he just had a little bit more quick to trigger as far as those pitches can happen. It's an interesting type pitch that just kind of has a good type of appeal for getting some of that just unwind to kind of see Biggie kind of just deal with like the evening slag of just like a long makeshift kind of day. Everyday Struggle's a nice one. This is kind of a more commercial type one. It's like a breezy kind of gusty cousin of Juicy. I would definitely feel like here just a basic kind of commercial rumination. Definitely, this is just good for some slummish kind of outing. So this is like a ghetto type song, just in the pitch behind it. Just a good, is 1-2 punch with Juicy, definitely within that fare. If you need some more radio type appeal for like a breezy, just kind of just overall this overcast kind of day, just for, if you listen to Juicy Monday or Tuesday, you'd probably listen to Everyday Struggle like Wednesday, Thursday. Just kind of a good extra companion to that particular type pitch with like some relative kind of appeal. It's kind of more get through the week type vibes as far as those pitches gonna happen. Just overcome like the concept, just more rags to riches type tones within the pitch behind it. Good type flair. Real nice one on here also would be Me and My Bitch. This has some pretty good appeal behind it. This is not as commonly talked about for like Biggie songs that have some highlights, but it's like a malaise kind of evening saunter. I would definitely feel like it's kind of a bickering song, but enjoying the concept of bickering as far as those pitches can happen. Just the spice of that as far as those pitches can happen. Just kind of ride out with the Bella. I'd definitely say with this particular pitch, and kind of like a fuck the world type vibe just in the pitch behind it. Almost makes me question if Tupac stole the particular vibe from Biggie off this particular one, because Tupac had a song called Me and My Girlfriend off of his Don Illuminati album, the Machiavelli album, but Biggie did this way back in '94 as far as those pitches can happen, and he nailed the appeal behind it. It's kind of a Bonnie and Clyde type song just in the pitch. It just fuck the world, life sucks, work sucks, some of that type fair, makeshift sucks, some of those type pitches just in the tone behind it. So it just has the aspect of some of that. It's really nailing that particular vibe. One of the few lady songs on here, apart from Big Papa, I'd have to say for the most part, and possibly One More Chance, was just a good type tone for some of that just makeshift dread, just with Bella's in mind, with Babe by your side as far as this pitch can happen. Ready to Die is a nice one. The title track, it's like an after work shift kind of saunter around. I'd have to say about this one, just some basic traffic and mild errands. I'd have to say about this particular song, just snackage, smoke joints up, some of those type fares as far as those fares going to happen. This is another one just kind of like Machine Gun Funk, just a little bit more of a woozy type one, just within the pitch behind it. Just basic kind of concept of disc hanging near your vehicle out in the driveway, pitches like that, smoking the L just like in the driveway, getting some subway pitches like that, just checking yourself on some of those type pitches, just kind of in between type moments, just maybe chatting with the neighbors, some of those type fares, just standard tasks, reading the mail, some of those type pitches. I have to say mild errands is pitched like that, just standard dredge, just like the concept, but it does it within a relatively kind of aspected type tone behind it. It does it within a relatively aspected type tone behind it. So Biggie's lyricism is compelling enough to make these songs kind of interesting. It's not just like the typical kind of makeshift dredge, but it's just a good concept, kind of have some of that type fare. Good, nice one. There actually is quite a few relative makeshift type songs on here to have for some of that just abrasive dislike. Pretty much between about 3:30 to about 6:30 as far as those pitches can happen. But yeah, like I was saying, there's just not a ton of really like club type hops on here, which is surprising. I didn't realize that as much back in the day. But apart from Big Papa, I mean, I would say that Juicy is kind of a club type song in a more kind of fizzy type sense, but it's mainly Big Papa, possibly One More Chance, and Who Shot You that have like the main dominance in that sort of factor. But another nice highlight on here in a surprising sense would be Suicidal Thoughts. It's like a dark, shrill, and moody kind of morbidness to kind of get here. Really like the lyricism of this particular song. Just a different flavor from most of the album, I'd have to say, as far as those pitches can happen. This has some fiery push about it. So it's just Biggie kind of contemplating just the concept, like the Biggie just kind of being contemplative, like the name of the album, as far as those pitches can happen. Some good type fare, some good type dark fare to kind of get within those pitches. Just a good type pitch, some good type dark fare to kind of get within those pitches. Pretty much would also fit right in with Life After Death. pretty much would also fit right in with the Life After Death album from '97 as far as those pitch can happen with it. Just some good type tones. It's real nice lyricism as usual for Biggie. Just good type stuff there. Good song as far as those pitch can happen. Just Playing Dreams is a nice one as well. This is like another one off the remastered edition. It's like an original and popping kind of ode to diva lusting as far as those pitch can happen. Biggie just goes through a list of divas he'd like to bang. Pretty clever type pitch, especially for back in '93, '94 as far as those pairs can happen. Just excellent type finesse for that. It's like a stylish and grand appeal about this particular song. It's like a good saloon hopper. It's kind of ones, I mean, I feel like when I say saloon type music, it doesn't feel like bar type music where you'd be at like a karaoke bar. It just would be more places like they were like in the early '90s, like places where you'd play Digital Underground and Tupac and some of those type folks where it would be more beer mugs and just kind of more western, almost saloon type music just within the tone behind it. Ice Cube was pretty good at songs like this. Brother Lynch Hung, some of those type folks is reminiscent of like the early '90s. I do feel like there's some good saloon type music on here. Machine Gun Funk, Just Playing Dreams, some of those type ones just in the pitch behind it. Possibly Everyday Struggle. Good type just day hop type here, just in a standard sense of getting some liquor sipping just within like a malaise kind of afternoon. And then Friend of Mine is a nice one. This is one I didn't listen to as much back in the day, but I do appreciate this one pretty good now. It's like some house party spices I would feel like here in just neighborhood saunter and gallivant within the pitch behind it. Definitely some good 40-ounce music and some lyrical snarl to kind of get. It's kind of the concept, but just like a house party, just something that would feel like Eazy-E would kind of do, or Tupac in a more house party type vibe, and just within the pitch of like some neighborhood, just kind of turn up just in the pitch behind it. This more kind of frat type neighborhood, just neighborhood romps pitches like that. Some good type spice kind of get that. They're definitely, this is like Biggie's version of like a song like Party and Bullshit, which Party and Bullshit was actually by like Craig Mack or something like that. I don't remember where that real song originated, but I think it was from Craig Mack off of his '94 album. He just featured on there as one of the songs that got Biggie's foot in the door. But it's just some good house party type appeals that Biggie's pretty good at. I definitely like those moments because Biggie blew up so fast that he didn't really get to do a ton of like these house party type songs. So it's a good type pitch for that. But yeah, this album, just all the descriptions I gave about it, I'm going to give this album, like I said, 9.25 out of 10. Very impactful type products. Just the concept that there's just a few more snags and moments that just some of these city hop, just kind of more city weaving type songs just don't have as much full bound appeal. Some of these city weaving type songs just don't have as much full bound appeal. I'd say it was just within the pitch behind. But the social score, that's a little bit trickier. I think I'll give the social score like an 8.5 out of 10. I just look within the tone. I mean, this is a pretty excellent album. Biggie has some pretty instantaneous type appeal. I would definitely feel like just a legend in the rap game pitch like that. He has the critic and rave and just overall casual type appeal within the pitch behind. It's just the fact that the songs on here are just not as full bound kind of casual. When you get past like the furor and the hype and the acclaim and all that, you realize when you actually listen to a few songs by Biggie and say, well, what's a great smoking song? What's a great hot box the whip type song? What's some great ladies type songs? With some good after hours kickbacks? Some of those type moments. In a retro sense, it has some of these, but just not as profusely as what you might think. I mean, yeah, Big Papa is a great classic club highlight, but there's not really any other song like it on here apart from maybe like the relatively fizziness of Juicy, but that one's just a little bit more vanilla in a sense, a little bit more commercial. One More Chance just doesn't have as much full bound kind of commercial appeal compared to like the remix. And some of these other songs on here just don't hold a candle in terms of like in terms of lyricism, there's definitely plenty to gab about, but in terms of just like casual bops like you would get from folks like 50 Cent or Eminem, or just folks that kind of pump out these more club type bops in like a casual sense, just rip these things to shreds. 3-6 Mafia, T.I., Nate, 3-6 Mafia, T.I., Lil Jon, some of these type folks, this is not really that feral or real productive of like a product in terms of like the powder K kind of TGI, in terms of like the powder K kind of TGIF type sense that I'd say it's just in the pitch behind. But I look after still some good type of appeals. Good album. It just is not as full blown crazy or weekend ready. 8.5. So in terms of the future, like that's difficult because Biggie is deceased as far as this pitch can happen. He did put out like a posthumous album recently in 2017, but apart from that, I think I've reviewed almost everything. I am eventually going to get to the Junior Mafia album from '95. That's on the way as far as this pitch can happen. And then there is at least like I was saying, like the King and I from 2017, there might be like one other Biggie project. I know there's like a Biggie mixtape that has a whole bunch of songs on there that might actually have the One More Chance remix on there. Just like some Biggie snippets and leftovers. It's actually by like it wasn't Easy Mo B, but it was one of those type folks. I forget who particularly was, but it was like a Biggie affiliate that was really rolling with Biggie back in '94, '95. So there is like a Biggie '90s mixtape, which is pretty dope appeal. But apart from those type things, for the most part, it's basically a wrap with the Biggie stuff. I would have to say it's like a arguable kind of classic. I mean, for most folks, they probably signify it being a classic, but I just look after, there's just a few snags about it, but I look after, it's still pretty impactful within the sense behind it.